Stop. Before you click away, I need you to understand something. Everything you think you know about Rome is incomplete. At its height, Rome was not a city. It was an entire civilization compressed into one place. 1 million people, more than any other city on Earth would hold for another 15 centuries. This empire did not rise because of luck. It rose because of a system so ruthless, so brilliant, so brutally efficient that we are still living inside its shadow today. 8 centuries of war, genius, betrayal, and collapse, and a fall so total that humanity would not recover for 1,000 years. This is not a documentary. This is a resurrection. The ancient world, rebuilt, frame by frame, stone by stone. It begins with a story that sounds like myth. But underneath every myth is a buried truth. The year is 753 BC. 7 hills, 1 river, a village that should never have survived. Forget the marble, forget the columns. The first Romans lived in huts of straw and dried mud. No temples, no armies, no written laws. Just farmers with spears and an extraordinary will to survive. Legend says Rome was founded by twins, Romulus and Remus, nursed by a wild she-wolf after being abandoned in the wilderness. History says those twins represent the savage, untamed origin of everything that followed. Romulus killed his own twin brother to build this city. Why? Because Remus crossed a boundary. The first Roman law, written in blood: you do not cross the boundary. This was day 1. Within 3 generations, that collection of huts became a recognizable city. Not through divine intervention, through systematic theft of neighboring land, forced alliances, and political cunning that no modern state has fully matched. 7 kings ruled Rome before the Republic. Each one shaped the city in ways that outlasted them, and each one was ultimately murdered, exiled, or overthrown. Power in Rome was always borrowed, never permanent. The last king, Tarquin the Proud, fell not from military defeat, but from scandal. His son committed an unforgivable act. The Roman aristocracy didn't just change leaders, they abolished kingship entirely. That decision changed everything. 509 BC. From the ashes of monarchy, Romans built something the world had never seen: a republic. 2 elected leaders, annual terms. No single man above the law. It was radical. It was fragile. It was the template for every democracy that followed. 2 consuls, elected every single year, with equal veto power over each other. Neither could act without the other's agreement. It was the world's first institutional check on power. It was also the seed of the Republic's eventual destruction. In 500 BC, Rome controlled 900 square kilometers, one tiny piece of one peninsula. Yet something burned inside this city, an ambition so total, so absolute, that it would not stop until there was nothing left to conquer. The early Romans were not yet invincible. They lost battles. They were sacked by Gauls in 390 BC. The city burned, the Senate refused to flee, and the Gauls reportedly found old men sitting motionless in their chairs like gods. The Romans paid a ransom and then spent centuries making sure it never happened again. The Samnite Wars lasted 50 years. 3 rounds of brutal mountain warfare against a people who fought Rome to a standstill. Each time Rome lost, it adapted. Each time it adapted, it came back stronger. This was the Roman pattern: defeat as a training exercise. While fighting these wars, Rome was also building something equally powerful: bureaucracy. a census, a tax system, a legal code. Rome didn't just win wars, it organized the peace that came after them. That is what made it permanent. Rome's true secret weapon was not its army. It was its citizenship policy. Conquered enemies could become Romans, pay taxes, serve in the army, follow the laws, and you belong. No other empire in history has ever done this so systematically or so successfully. By 270 BC, Rome had absorbed all of Italy, not by destroying its peoples, but by folding them in. The peninsula was Roman. And Rome looked across the sea and saw a world that was not yet Rome. That could not stand. The Roman legion, the most lethal military system the ancient world ever produced. And it was built not by professional soldiers, but by farmers who served their required years and then went home. A Roman legion was 5,000 men, but it was not just a fighting force, it was a society. Engineers, doctors, priests, surveyors, carpenters. A legion could build a road, a bridge, a siege engine, and a fortified camp, all before breakfast. The testudo, the tortoise, under arrow fire, under rocks, under anything the enemy could throw, shields lock together in seconds. An entire century becomes a single moving fortress. Nothing in the ancient world could stop it. Then Rome met its match. Carthage, a civilization built on trade, wealth, and the finest navy in the world. Rome had never built a serious warship. In 264 BC, the First Punic War began, and Rome was about to learn naval warfare the hard way. When Rome captured a Carthaginian ship, they reverse-engineered it in 60 days and built a fleet of 330 warships. Then they invented the corvus, a boarding bridge, turning sea battles into land battles. Rome won the sea by refusing to fight on its terms. But it was the Second Punic War that produced the man who came closest to destroying Rome. Hannibal Barca, the greatest military genius the ancient world ever produced. And he had a plan that Rome would never see coming. Hannibal crossed the Alps with 37 war elephants in the dead of winter. He lost half his army to cold, avalanches, and hostile mountain tribes. He arrived in Italy with 26,000 men, exhausted, half frozen, and outnumbered. And then he started winning. At Trebia and Lake Trasimene, Hannibal destroyed 2 Roman armies using ambush and terrain. He understood Roman psychology, their aggression, their impatience, and he weaponized it against them. Cannae, 216 BC. Hannibal executed the most perfectly choreographed encirclement in military history. 70,000 Romans killed in a single afternoon. The largest single-day military disaster Rome ever suffered. And Rome still did not surrender. A senator named Fabius Maximus advised Rome to stop fighting Hannibal directly, to starve him through guerrilla tactics. Rome called him a coward. They were wrong. But their stubbornness was also, paradoxically, the reason they survived. Rome mobilized everything. Women donated jewelry, slaves were armed and promised freedom, children were enlisted. Rome lost battle after battle and raised new armies each time. This was not bravery. It was something beyond bravery. It was institutional refusal to accept reality. The answer to Hannibal was a 24-year-old general named Publius Cornelius Scipio. The Senate thought sending him to Africa was reckless. History proved them wrong in the most spectacular fashion possible. Scipio did what no Roman general had dared. He took the war to Carthage itself. Hannibal was recalled from Italy, where he had remained undefeated for 15 years. The final confrontation would happen in Africa. At Zama, Scipio used Hannibal's own tactics against him. He had studied every battle Hannibal had ever fought. The undefeated general tasted defeat for the first and only time. Carthage fell. Rome emerged as the undisputed master of the Western Mediterranean. With Carthage destroyed and Greece absorbed, Rome had no serious rival left. Within 50 years, the entire Mediterranean coastline, all of it, was either Roman territory or a Roman client state. The sea itself became what Romans called Mare Nostrum, our sea. By 100 BC, Rome was the undisputed center of the world. 1 million people in a single city. More wealth flowing through its markets than any place on earth. And underneath all of it, a crisis building that no military victory could solve. Conquest created wealth. Wealth created inequality. And inequality created a rage that no foreign enemy could have ignited. The republic that conquered the world was quietly setting itself on fire from within. Most Romans did not live in marble villas. They lived in wooden apartment blocks called insulae, up to 7 stories tall, with no running water, no sewage, no fire stairs. Rome's insulae burned constantly. The Great Fire of 64 AD was not unusual. It was Tuesday. The Republic's dirty secret, military success, was destroying the small farmer. While men served in distant wars, their land was bought, cheaply, by force, by aristocrats building slave-worked estates. The soldiers who built the empire came home to find they owned nothing. In 133 BC, a reformer named Tiberius Gracchus proposed taking public land from wealthy aristocrats and redistributing it to landless veterans. The Senate's response was not debate. It was not compromise. It was murder. They beat Tiberius Gracchus to death on the Senate steps, with chairs. Then they killed 300 of his supporters the same day. This was 133 BC. The Republic had survived Hannibal. It would not survive itself. Into this fracturing republic stepped Gaius Marius, a new man, not from the aristocracy, who reformed the Roman army by opening it to the landless poor. This single act rewired the Republic's nervous system. Soldiers no longer owed loyalty to Rome. They owed it to their general. When you pay a soldier, equip him, lead him to victory, and promise him land, he follows you, not the Senate, not the Republic. You. Marius built the first truly personal army. Every ambitious general who came after him understood exactly what that meant. The inevitable result was civil war. Marius versus Sulla. 2 Roman generals, each commanding a personal army, each certain he was the one true savior of Rome. What followed was something the Republic had no mechanism to stop. Sulla marched his army into Rome, the first Roman general in history to do so. The Republic had no answer. The Senate had passed a law. Sulla had legions. Laws are words. Legions are steel. Rome chose steel. Sulla posted proscription lists, names of enemies to be killed on sight by anyone for a reward. 4,000 Romans died, their property confiscated, their families destroyed. Sulla called this justice. The Senate ratified it. This was still technically the Republic. After Sulla came something even more dangerous, the First Triumvirate. 3 men, Pompey, Crassus, and Caesar, made a private agreement to divide Roman power between themselves. The Senate was not invited. The people were not consulted. The Republic had become theatre. Pompey had conquered the East, Syria, Judea, Pontus. He returned to Rome with so much gold he could have funded the Republic for years. He was the most celebrated man in Rome. He was also about to make the worst strategic miscalculation in Roman history. Crassus, the wealthiest man in Rome, wanted military glory to match his partners. He invaded Parthia. At the Battle of Carrhae in 53 BC, the Parthians killed 20,000 Romans and captured the eagle standards, the sacred symbols of Roman military honor. Crassus died in the disaster. The triumvirate was over. Without Crassus, the alliance between Pompey and Caesar collapsed. The Senate, aligned with Pompey, ordered Caesar to give up his army and return to Rome to face trial. Caesar's response would change history. The Republic was not killed by Caesar. It was killed by every compromise, every murder, every private deal, every proscription list that came before him. Caesar was not the cause of the Republic's death. He was its autopsy. Julius Caesar. 2,000 years after his death, his name is still a title. Kaiser in German, Tsar in Russian. No other person in history has had their name adopted as a word for power itself. So who was he, really? While Pompey and Crassus competed in Rome, Caesar spent 8 years conquering Gaul. He fought over 50 battles. He killed, by his own account, 1 million people. He enslaved another million. He wrote about it in beautiful, precise Latin, in the third person. The siege of Alesia was military engineering at its most insane. Caesar surrounded 80,000 Gauls, then built a second wall behind his army to fight off a relief force of 250,000. He was besieging the besiegers. It lasted 6 weeks. Rome won. Vercingetorix, the brilliant Gallic chieftain who had united the tribes against Rome, rode out of Alesia, stripped his armor, and laid it at Caesar's feet. Then he was imprisoned in Rome for 6 years, paraded in Caesar's triumph, and strangled. Back in Rome, the Senate was reading Caesar's dispatches from Gaul with growing alarm. He was too successful, too beloved by his soldiers, too wealthy from the spoils of conquest. In Rome, a man who was too powerful had only 2 endings: abdication or conflict. January 49 BC. Caesar stood at the Rubicon, a small river that was the legal boundary between his military command and civilian Rome. To cross it with an army was treason, punishable by death. He stood there. For how long, no one recorded. He crossed. The die is cast. Alia iacta est. Caesar said those words here, and with that single step into a shallow river, he ended 460 years of republican government. Not with a speech, not with a manifesto, with one horse's footstep in cold water. Pompey and the Senate fled. They expected Caesar to move slowly, to consolidate, to negotiate. Caesar moved like a storm. He reached Rome without fighting a single major battle on Italian soil. The city surrendered before it had time to decide whether to resist. At Pharsalus in 48 BC, Caesar destroyed Pompey's larger army through superior tactics and soldier quality. Pompey fled to Egypt. There, the Egyptian court, hoping to please Caesar, had him murdered as he stepped onto the beach. Caesar reportedly wept when they showed him the head. In Egypt, Caesar met Cleopatra VII, the last pharaoh of Egypt. She was 21. He was 52. She spoke 9 languages, including Egyptian, the only Ptolemaic ruler who had ever learned it. Caesar was brilliant. Cleopatra was brilliant and dangerous. Rome would feel the consequences for years. Caesar returned to Rome and celebrated 4 triumphs in 4 days, over Gaul, Egypt, Pontus, and Africa. It was the largest display of Roman military success in history. He was popular beyond any precedent, and he was about to make the one mistake that popularity could not protect him from. Caesar accepted the title Dictator Perpetuo, dictator in perpetuity. In Rome, dictator was a legal office, but always temporary. Perpetual dictator was something else entirely. It was king without the word. The Senate's old guard began to count their daggers. The Ides of March, 44 BC. Caesar had been warned by priests, by his wife who dreamed of his murder, by a soothsayer in the street. He dismissed them all. He was Caesar. He had survived everything. 23 stab wounds. His last words, if they existed, were not recorded with certainty. What we know is this: he stopped struggling, covered his face with his toga, and fell at the base of a statue of Pompey. The irony was almost theatrical. The assassins expected gratitude. The Roman people gave them fury. Caesar had left every Roman citizen 300 sesterces in his will. Mark Antony read it aloud in the Forum. By nightfall, the assassins were fleeing Rome. Caesar was more powerful dead than he had ever been alive. His name was Octavian, Caesar's adopted son, 18 years old when Caesar was murdered. 40 years later, he would be Augustus Caesar, the first true emperor of Rome, and perhaps the most consequential political figure in Western history. Octavian formed a new triumvirate and immediately published proscription lists. Among the 2,000 names, Marcus Tullius Cicero, the voice of the Republic. His head and hands were nailed to the speaker's platform in the Forum when he had given his greatest speeches. The final civil war ended at the Battle of Actium in 31 BC. Octavian's fleet outmaneuvered Antony's. Cleopatra fled with 60 ships. Antony followed her. His army surrendered without a fight. The civil wars were over. One man stood above the ruins. Octavian understood something Caesar had not. Romans would accept absolute power if it was not called absolute power. He refused the title of king. He performed modesty. He became Augustus, the revered one, the first citizen, an emperor who called himself a servant of the Republic. Augustus found Rome a city of brick and left it a city of marble. More than 80 public buildings constructed in one reign. The Forum rebuilt. Architecture as propaganda, the most permanent kind. Every building announced, the chaos is over, Rome is eternal. The Pax Romana, the Roman peace, 200 years of relative stability across an empire of 70 million people. No comparable period of sustained peace existed in Western history until the late 20th century. It was the most successful experiment in governance ever attempted. Inside the Pax Romana, a Roman citizen could travel from Hadrian's Wall in Scotland to the Euphrates River in modern Iraq, using the same roads, the same currency, the same legal system, and drink clean water from the same extraordinary engineering achievement. Roman aqueducts delivered 1 million cubic meters of fresh water to Rome every single day. They maintained a consistent 1 in 4,800 slope without modern instruments. Some of these aqueducts still carry water today. 83,000 kilometers of paved Roman roads, built so straight, using surveying instruments and geometry, that you can still trace them on satellite images 2,000 years later. Every road served one master purpose: to move legions fast. The greatest communications network of the ancient world. The Colosseum, built in just 10 years, completed in 80 AD. 80,000 spectators, 76 entrances, 4 stories of arched concrete and travertine. It could be fully evacuated in 10 minutes, a standard many modern stadiums still cannot meet. Beneath the Colosseum's sand was the Hypogeum, a mechanical labyrinth of tunnels, cages, and counterweight elevators. Wild animals could appear from beneath the floor in seconds. The spectacle of death was engineered with the same precision as the aqueducts. Gladiators were not helpless slaves thrown to die. Most were professional athletes, trained for years, fed high-calorie diets, given dedicated medical care. The survival rate was actually quite high. A dead gladiator represented an enormous financial loss. Owners strongly preferred victories. The Pantheon, built by Hadrian in 125 AD. Its unreinforced concrete dome, 43 meters in diameter, remains the largest ever constructed without steel reinforcement. The oculus has always been open to the sky. When it rains inside the Pantheon, the floor drains perfectly. In 79 AD, the city of Pompeii was sealed in volcanic ash and preserved for 19 centuries. What it preserved was not the grand Rome of emperors, but the ordinary Rome of bakers, shopkeepers, election candidates, and people writing things on walls they probably should not have. When Vesuvius erupted on August 24, 79 AD, the pyroclastic surge reached Pompeii in minutes. The plaster casts of victims, made by filling the voids left by decomposed bodies in hardened ash, are the most intimate encounter with ancient death ever discovered. The 5 Good Emperors, 96 to 180 AD. For 84 years, Rome was governed by men chosen for competence rather than blood. Nerva, Trajan, Hadrian, Antoninus Pius, Marcus Aurelius. Plato dreamed of philosopher kings. For 3 generations, Rome actually had them. Marcus Aurelius was perhaps the greatest of them. A Stoic philosopher who never wanted the throne, who ruled for 19 years almost entirely at war. His private journal, written for himself, never intended to be published, became the Meditations. Still read by presidents, generals, and athletes today. He wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." He wrote this while watching his son die, while an empire cracked at its edges, while a plague killed millions. He published nothing. He just kept writing. Then came Commodus, the son Marcus Aurelius left behind. He renamed Rome after himself, Colonia Commodiana. He fought in the Colosseum as Hercules, against opponents specifically chosen to lose. He executed senators for laughing. The decline had a face now. Commodus was strangled by his own wrestling partner on New Year's Eve, 192 AD. What followed was Rome's greatest crisis of succession. 5 emperors in a single year, the Praetorian Guard auctioning the throne to the highest bidder, literally at auction. The crisis of the 3rd century, 235 to 284 AD, was 50 years of near-continuous civil war. 26 emperors in 50 years. Average reign under 2 years. Most died violently. The army made and unmade rulers faster than Rome could train administrators to govern. At the crisis's peak, the Roman Empire fractured into 3 competing states simultaneously, each claiming to be the legitimate Rome, each fighting the others while barbarian pressure mounted at every border. It took a near genius to reassemble the pieces. Diocletian split the empire into 4 administrative zones, the Tetrarchy, with 2 senior and 2 junior emperors. He stabilized the currency, reorganized the military, and extended the bureaucracy. Tax collectors became more feared than legions. But it worked. Constantine the Great defeated his rivals at the Milvian Bridge in 312 AD. He attributed the victory to a vision of a Christian symbol in the sky. Whether he genuinely converted or recognized Christianity's political utility is still debated. The outcome was not. Constantine moved the capital to Constantinople, modern Istanbul, in 330 AD. The decision was military, economic, and symbolic. It also guaranteed that when the West eventually fell, the Eastern Roman Empire would survive for another 1,000 years. Theodosius divided the empire between his two sons in 395 AD. This division was supposed to be administrative. It became permanent. The two halves would never reunite. The West was already dying. The East, later called Byzantium, would not fall for another 1,058 years. Beyond Rome's borders, the ancient world was moving. Entire peoples were being displaced and pushed westward into Roman territory by a force that Rome had never encountered. The Huns. Attila, the scourge of God. He ruled from Hungary to the borders of China. He demanded tribute from both halves of the Roman Empire simultaneously. When they paid, he asked for more. When they refused, he came himself. Attila destroyed over 100 Roman cities in the Balkans alone. Constantinople's recently built walls were the only thing that saved the eastern capital. The Eastern Empire paid him £700 of gold per year, then 2,100 to stay away. The Battle of the Catalonian Plains, 451 AD. Roman general Aetius, called the last of the Romans, allied with the Visigoth king and stopped Attila's western advance in one of the largest and most violent battles in ancient history, Rome's last great military victory. The following year, Attila invaded Italy itself and sacked Aquileia so completely it was never rebuilt. Then, mysteriously, he turned back before reaching Rome. Pope Leo met him on the road. Disease in his army, supply shortages, and a payment of tribute likely explain the retreat more than divine intervention. Attila died on his wedding night in 453, a nosebleed that drowned him while he slept. The empire he had built from pure personal force immediately shattered among his sons. Rome had survived Attila, but the structural damage was irreparable. Rome had already been sacked before Attila. In 410 AD, the Visigoths under Alaric spent 3 days in the city. They burned relatively little and killed relatively few by ancient standards, but the psychological impact was absolute. Rome, the city that had conquered the world, had been taken. In 455, the Vandals arrived. They were not interested in destruction. They were interested in everything movable. For 2 weeks, they stripped Rome of its portable wealth and sailed away. From this deliberate, professional looting, we get our word: vandalism. The Western Roman Empire's final emperors were children, figurehead puppets of barbarian military commanders who held the actual power. One general, Ricimer, made and unmade 5 emperors in 18 years. The throne had become a prop in someone else's story. Rome's population collapsed before the empire formally ended, from 1 million at its peak to perhaps 100,000 by 500 AD. Buildings were stripped for building materials by survivors who needed stone more than they needed monuments. The Forum Romanum became a cow pasture. In 402 AD, the court of the Western Empire relocated to Ravenna, defensible, surrounded by marshes and coastline. The emperors abandoned Rome itself. The eternal city was no longer the center of power, just a name. And names do not stop armies. Odoacer was a Germanic chieftain commanding barbarian troops who were, technically, serving in the Roman army as foederati. In 476, he decided he was done serving a powerless emperor. His troops agreed. They marched on Ravenna. September 4th, 476 AD, the last Western Roman emperor was 16 years old. His name, Romulus Augustulus, combined the name of Rome's legendary founder and its first emperor. He handed his crown to Odoacer without a speech, without resistance, without a recorded word. Odoacer sent the Western imperial regalia to Constantinople with a letter saying the West no longer needed its own emperor. He was right. The Eastern emperor accepted the regalia, gave Odoacer the title of patrician, and filed the correspondence. The Western Roman Empire ended with a polite administrative memo. What followed is called the Dark Ages for a reason. Western European population fell by perhaps a quarter within a century. Long-distance trade nearly ceased. The infrastructure Rome had built, roads, aqueducts, granaries, began to decay with no one to maintain them. But Rome did not die everywhere. Constantinople continued. The Eastern Empire, later called Byzantium, preserved Roman law, Roman administration, and the accumulated learning of the ancient world for another millennium. Greek-speaking Romans would call themselves Romans until 1453 AD. The true end of the Roman world came not in 476, but on May 29, 1453, when Constantine XI Palaiologos, the last Roman emperor, died fighting on the walls of Constantinople as Ottoman forces broke through. He removed his insignia, charged into the battle, and was never found. Stand in modern Rome, and you are standing inside a palimpsest, layers of time written over each other. The forum where Cicero argued, the stones Caesar walked on, the ground where Nero's palace once stood. These are not ruins. They are memory made physical. Look at any seat of democratic government on Earth. The columns, the pediment, the dome, all Roman. The founders of the United States explicitly modeled their republic on Rome. They read Cicero and Polybius. They feared the same fate. They named their upper chamber the Senate. Half the world speaks languages descended from Latin: French, Spanish, Italian, Portuguese, Romanian, all daughters of the tongue that legions carried across 3 continents. Even English, Germanic at its core, is more than 60% Latin in vocabulary. Every time you say justice, you speak Rome. Roman law never stopped governing. Innocent until proven guilty? Roman. The right to face your accuser? Roman. Habeas corpus, rooted in Roman precedent. Written law, legal representation, judicial appeal. All Roman inventions, still functioning in every courtroom on Earth today. You use a Roman calendar. January is named for Janus, the Roman god of beginnings. March for Mars, the god of war. July for Julius Caesar. August for Augustus. The names of our months are Roman emperors and gods, embedded in every phone, every schedule, every appointment ever made. The Roman Catholic Church inherited not just Christian theology, but Roman organizational genius. Diocese, a Roman administrative term. Bishop, from a Roman title for overseer. Pontiff, a Roman priestly term meaning bridge builder. The Pope rules from Rome. The empire never truly ended. The aqueduct of Segovia was built around 100 AD, using no mortar whatsoever. Just precisely cut granite blocks balanced by their own weight and Roman precision. It carried water to the city for 19 centuries. It was decommissioned in the 20th century because it still worked. Roman marine concrete, made with volcanic ash and seawater, actually becomes stronger over time as minerals crystallize within it. Modern Portland cement deteriorates within decades. Roman concrete improves with age. Scientists are still trying to fully replicate the mixture 2,000 years later. Underfloor heating, a Roman invention from the 1st century BC. The hypercaust, furnaces below floor level pushing hot air through a space beneath raised tiles. The principle is physically identical to modern radiant floor heating. Rome invented it 2,000 years before it became fashionable again. The Colosseum's design, numbered gates, tiered seating sorted by social class, rapid entry and exit routes, is the direct ancestor of every modern sports stadium. Roman engineers solved the mass gathering problem so completely that stadium architects 2,000 years later still use the same solutions. Cognitive behavioral therapy, the most widely practiced psychotherapy in the world today, is built directly on Stoic philosophy, developed in Rome by Seneca, Epictetus, and Marcus Aurelius. The idea that we control our responses, not events, is a Roman insight still healing people in clinical offices today. Roman numerals appear on Super Bowl logos, luxury watches, monarchs' official names, film copyright dates, and clock faces around the world. We use them deliberately, for permanence, authority, and gravity, because Roman numerals carry an automatic cultural association with civilization itself. Civil law systems, used by more than 150 countries covering 60% of the world's population, are based directly on Roman law. The Napoleonic Code, foundation of French law and all its descendants, was explicitly modeled on Justinian's codification of Roman law in 534 AD. Modern military organization is Roman organization. The rank of centurion, commander of 80 men, is the structural ancestor of the sergeant. The legion maps to the division. The Roman army's organizational chart was so efficient that no military in history has found reason to fundamentally change it. In Britain, some 10,000 kilometers of modern roads follow Roman routes laid 2,000 years ago. The engineers who built Britain's motorway network in the 1960s repeatedly discovered that the straightest, most efficient path was already a Roman road buried underneath the existing landscape. Put your hand on a Roman column. The senators who passed the laws that built Western civilization touched the same stone. The generals who conquered 3 continents walked on the same pavement. History is not an abstraction. It is the world you are standing in right now. Rome rose from 7 hills. It conquered the world. It fell, not to a superior enemy, but to the weight of its own contradictions, the corruption of its own institutions, the slow erosion of the values it had once demanded of itself. But every civilization falls. Egypt fell, Babylon fell, Greece fell. What is remarkable about Rome is not that it fell, but that it lasted 2,206 years, and that its wreckage contained the architecture of everything that came after it. The real question is not, why did Rome fall? The real question is, why did it last so long? The answer is in its contradictions: brutal and just, expansionist and law-giving, totalitarian and civic-minded. Rome held its contradictions in tension long enough to build something that outlasted the Roman Empire itself. Every modern democracy is asking the same questions Rome asked. How do you concentrate enough power to govern effectively without concentrating so much power that governance becomes tyranny? Rome had no permanent answer, neither do we, but we are still using their vocabulary to debate it. The Temple of Saturn in the Forum has stood since 497 BC. It watched the Republic rise and fall, Caesar's assassination, the emperors, the barbarian invasions, the Middle Ages, the Renaissance, and every era since. It is still standing this morning. It will still be standing long after everything we are currently doing is forgotten. The Romans looked at these same stars. They named the constellations we still use. They calculated the same planetary movements. They wondered what would outlast them. The answer, it turns out, is nearly everything they built: material, legal, linguistic, and philosophical. There is still an entire Rome underground. Every year, construction in modern Rome uncovers another layer: a mosaic floor beneath a parking lot, a buried basilica beneath an office building, an inscription that revises what we thought we knew. Rome is still revealing itself. The excavation has been going on for 500 years and is nowhere near complete. Every time you elect a representative, follow a legal procedure, speak a Romance language, drive on a straight road, drink water through engineered pipes, read a Stoic philosopher, or watch sport in a stadium, you are inside Rome. It never ended. It transformed. History wasn't written. It was built in stone, fire, and forgotten tongues. And some things, built with sufficient truth and sufficient precision, do not disappear. They just change form. Rome is still here. You are living inside it.